Hello, this is gonna be my video for Milestone 1. Okay, so player tank is able to move, shoot, and destroy stationary enemy tanks. And you need a floor and a collection of meshes in the world. Okay. So this is my floor for now. Right, there's the ceiling and the floor, right? Player prefab, enemy prefab, and the shell prefab that you're going to be shooting is what I have. Since before I start, I'm going to have to explain the game manager. I'm just going to show, that I'm filling this through. There's a singleton that keeps track of important game data and manages the flow of the game. So let me go into that script. As soon as Visual Studio decides to load. But basically, the game manager is going to instantiate the player and the enemies. Right now, there's going to be 4 enemies, but they all pretty much look the same, but they have different components. Okay, so I have some variables here on the game manager that's basically for the player, AI, spawn locations, and the UI manager right over here. I made the instance, and I have a private static game manager instance, which is the actual game manager, and then the public one is just a getter of the private one. That's the one that we're going to allow other scripts to access. We don't want any script to set this, so we're doing it this way. On awake, it's going to make the game manager and then spawn the player and spawn the enemy, right? So let me go through here. Okay, so you got the camera attached to the player, just following you around. I'm pressing W to go forward, S to go back, D to rotate right, and A to rotate the other way. Let me go in here. Okay, so the speed at which the player moves forward is available, backward, and rotate. Okay, so that's all available. Where did I put that? Okay, so rotate speed, reverse speed, and move speed, right? Let me show some code for that. Where is on? Okay, so yeah, I've serialized these fields, but they're private, right? This is the movement. These are the movement stats under the movement header, and these are the firing stats, right? So we're moving through the pawn, right? But in the tank data, we pass through a string and actually call the movement, because you can see it's not through update. I'm not calling this. It's calling it through tank data over here, depending on what you press. But let me go to pawn, and I'm using transform.translate to move forward and back, and then transform.rotate to move clockwise and counterclockwise. So, and this is where the rotate speed comes into play, move speed, and reverse speed. Okay. Now that I've showed that, spacebar to fire a shell in the direction that the tank is facing. Okay. So as you can see, the enemies are continuously shooting anyway, and it has a certain drop to it because there is a rigid body on every single one of these shells. But let me show. If you press space, it'll shoot like you can see over here. And I can't shoot too much because I limited the fire rate. Let me show where that's going. So basically, shot cooldown is what we're going to use. There's a cooldown to our shots, and if it's lower than or equal to fire rate, then we're allowed to shoot, right? But at start, shot cooldown is set to 0, and every update we add to it by time delta time, so that as soon as we shoot, it goes to 0 again over here, and then we have to wait until it is higher than 0.5, and then we can shoot again. But yeah, let me go back. And it's the same thing for the enemies because they use the same components except for this AI controller over here. And right now I just put an update, you know, telling them to shoot over and over. Rigid bodies, force it with it's pushed. First, let me show the force, and then I'll kill an enemy tank. So, bullet data is, this is the script that's on every single bullet. It has the damage that it does, the speed that it travels, and the lifespan. So it survives for 1.5 seconds, right? Unless it hits something else over here, then it'll die either way. But basically, if it collides with something that has a health component and a pawn component, then it'll send a receive damage function to the UI manager, which is basically taking away from that thing's health, right? And if that thing reaches below 0, because, you know, both tanks have a health component, and through this struct current health over here, if current health is below 0, then on death invoke, and on death invoke basically calls this function over here, destroy self, right? And this is where we're gonna see the instance, aka the game manager. If it's the player that just died, it's gonna take away 1 from the player, and it's gonna minus the score, right? And destroy that object, aka destroy the player. If it's not the player, then it's then it's an enemy, and it's gonna add to the player's score and destroy that game object after a slight delay. Okay, so let me show you here that they can die to get close, since it has a drag. Yeah, so he's dead. But let me go to the other enemies. So, as you can see from the health, max health is 100. The current health is private, so you can't really see it right now, but it does deplete by damage done every time you get hit. Okay, show that. Show that. We use the tank data component. I think I did talk about that, but did I show it? But yeah, they it requires a type of component pawn, because I mean this is controlling a pawn, so you might as well require the component. Since the tank that's gonna have this tank data on it is always gonna be the player, we're gonna set is player to true for other functions later on. And then in here, we're going to have 3 functions for input, moving, rotating, and firing. Firing is by using space. We set that in our input settings in Unity. And rotate is for turning left or right. So we're either going to do one or the other. We're not going to turn left and right at the same time. So I use the if and else if for that. And same thing for the accelerate and reverse. We're not going to do them at the same time, so I structured it like this. And if you press W, it's going to load this string over here with accelerate, right, and send that back to the pawn through this. And if it's accelerate, then you're going to move forward. And basically the others work the same. Don't need to move yet, they need to fire. I already showed that. AI controller, I think I showed that. Tracks their own score, yes, through the game manager. It must be visible in the inspector during testing. I'll change that and I'll go back. The point value for destroying a tank is a property of each tank. Okay, so gonna have to make some slight changes here since they have to be visible. How about I'm gonna make a separate here, a separate header here. We're gonna call it scoring, right? And in that, I'm gonna move this first. Okay. Points. Oh wait. Public. Or actually, let's make it... No, it's going to be accessed by other scripts, so we might as well make it public. Float, points. If I can spell. Oh my god. Alright, awarded. And let's just make it 10 like it was before. Alright. Okay. And we're just going to replace, let's go to health. We're just going to replace this with instance dot points award. Yep. Okay. And that's going to be the amount that it adds to when you kill an enemy player. We should make one that's called points deducted. We might as well. For this. I'm just going to type it and then make it now. Okay, so let's go back in the game manager. Hopefully I didn't spell it differently. And that's going to be 5 points. Right, then we're going to go back. Make sure that updates. Okay. And then what else? Actually, let me just drop some comments in here. Okay. Already did that. Is there anything I didn't? Oh yeah, so this is how the UI manager is managing the UI. So it's gonna send whoever uses this through the UI manager, like the bullet data, right? It's gonna use its reference of the UI manager and do either receive damage or heal. You know, it's gonna pass in the thing that it wants to affect its health component, the damage that it wants to do to it, or the heal value, and then a bool that represents whether this thing is the player or it's just an enemy, which we see over here. All right. And if it's the player, then it's gonna affect the player's health value as well as their health visual, right? Because their health visual has to match the value for it to make sense. If it's not the player, then it just affects the struct, the health value. Same thing with the heal damage. Okay. And then this is just how the camera is following the player. We set the camera's transform, the camera's parent to the target. The target is the player, right? We had to use this offset to make sure that the camera isn't like dead inside of the player, because then you're just going to see inside of the player and it's going to be terrible. Set the transform position of the camera to the offset, right? And then rotate towards to make sure that it's looking at it, and then use actual transform dot look at so that it can always follow wherever the player's looking towards, so that when it rotates, the camera rotates with the player instead of it just being stuck in one spot. I think you saw my comments, so that should be fine. I think that explains everything. Yeah, that should be it. Okay. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna submit this.